Michael was the kind of man people pointed to when they wanted an example of strength. He was 42, married with 2 children, the steady provider who left home before sunrise and returned long after dark. He worked 12 hours a day at the same company for nearly 2 decades. He rarely complained, rarely showed weakness. To his colleagues, he was reliable. To his family, he was dependable. To the world, he was the pillar of strength that every man is told he must be. But one Monday morning, without warning, everything changed. The company restructured. Michael was called into a glass office, handed a paper, and told his position was no longer needed. In less than 10 minutes, 20 years of loyalty disappeared. He walked out carrying a cardboard box, the weight of it crushing his chest more than his arms. He told himself it was just a job, but in reality, it felt like his entire identity had been taken away. At first, he tried to keep the mask on. He told his wife he would bounce back quickly, that it was nothing. He told his children not to worry. But at night, he poured whiskey into heavy glasses, staring into the liquid as if it could give him answers. The man who had seemed unshakable began to unravel. Arguments erupted at home. He punched walls. He drank until his words slurred and his hands shook. His wife no longer recognized the man she had married. His children avoided him, sensing the storm that never calmed. Michael had built his life on an image of strength. But the moment the role was stripped away, what remained was not power. It was emptiness. He looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. For decades, he had worn the mask of the provider, the stoic man, the dependable rock. Without that mask, he realized he did not know who he was. And this is where the darker truth appears. Because Michael is not unusual. Millions of men live exactly as he did. They put all of their energy into being what society told them they should be. Hard-working, dependable, always in control. But when life removes the role, when the mask is ripped away, they collapse. Not because they are weak, but because they never discovered where real strength actually comes from. This story forces us to ask a question most men are too afraid to face. If a single setback can shatter the identity you spent your life protecting, then was it ever true strength at all? What happens to men who never uncover their real power? The power that does not depend on a job title or on the approval of others, or on a mask that can be stripped away in a single meeting. What happens when that deeper strength is never found? And what if this is not just Michael's story, but a warning for every man who has confused wearing a mask with being strong? Michael's collapse may look like weakness, but in the psychology of Jung, it is something much deeper. What destroyed him was not the loss of a paycheck. It was the loss of an identity that had never belonged to him in the first place. Jung warned that most people live behind what he called the persona. The persona is the mask you wear to survive in society. It is the role you play so that the world accepts you. For Michael, the persona was the provider, the tireless worker, the man who never bends. The problem is not that he had a mask. We all need one. The problem is that he became the mask. When the mask was stripped away, nothing remained. This is the first truth. When you confuse your mask with your essence, you are building your life on sand. The moment the tide comes in, everything disappears. But the collapse of the persona is only the surface. Beneath it, something far more dangerous had been waiting. Jung called it the shadow. The shadow is the part of yourself you reject, the impulses you bury, the weaknesses you deny. For years, Michael had suppressed his anger, his fear of inadequacy, his need for rest. He buried them under long hours at the office, under the image of being unbreakable. But the unconscious does not forget. It waits, and when the persona cracked, the shadow rushed in. That is why his drinking spiraled. That is why his temper erupted. The shadow was no longer hidden, it was in control. Jung put it bluntly, until you make the unconscious conscious, It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Michael thought his fate was bad luck. In reality, it was the shadow finally taking the wheel. There was something else as well. Jung observed that our lives are shaped by what he called complexes. These are emotional knots formed in childhood that continue to pull at us as adults. Michael carried a father complex. His father had been a distant man, impossible to please. So Michael spent his life trying to prove he was strong enough, disciplined enough, good enough. His devotion to work was never just about money. It was about proving to a ghost that he was worthy. That complex drove him for decades. And when the job vanished, the complex screamed louder than ever. The tragedy of complexes is that they are invisible to us. We think we are free, but we are following scripts written long before we could choose. Michael's collapse was not just about losing a job, it was the script playing itself out. And then there is the anima, the inner feminine. For Jung, every man carries a hidden feminine image in his psyche. It is the source of his emotional life, his creativity, his ability to love. But most men, fearing weakness, repress it. Michael was no exception. He dismissed feelings as weakness, dismissed tenderness as soft. The result was a marriage that grew cold, children who feared him rather than trusted him. When a man denies his anima, he does not escape it. He projects it. He idealizes women as angels or demonizes them as enemies. In both cases, he never meets the feminine within himself, and so he cannot truly relate to it in others. Michael's anima had been ignored for decades. When the mask fell, he had no inner guide, no emotional compass. He was left alone with his shadow and his complexes. The anima could have been the bridge to his deeper self. Without it, he drowned. Jung would say that Michael's problem was not that he was weak, but that he had mistaken imitation strength for real strength. He thought power came from a mask, from control, from silence. Real power, Jung argued, comes from the courage to face what is within, from integrating the shadow instead of denying it, from untangling the complexes that secretly steer your life, from meeting the anima and learning that emotions are not weakness, but the doorway to wholeness. Michael never learned this. Most men never do, and that is why, when the persona collapses, so many collapse with it. Michael's downfall is not an isolated tragedy. It is a pattern. It is the quiet fate that waits for every man who builds his life on a mask, who never dares to face the deeper work of discovering his real strength. Jung warned that the unconscious does not disappear just because you ignore it. It grows in the dark, and when the mask shatters, it erupts. The first consequence is personal. Inside, the man who never faces himself lives in constant tension. He feels anxious without knowing why. He works harder and harder, yet no achievement satisfies him. He drinks, he gambles, he escapes into distractions. Depression creeps in, not always as sadness, but as numbness, as a deadening of the spirit. He cannot rest, because rest would force him to hear the voice of the shadow calling from below. He keeps running, but the chase never ends. The result is exhaustion, burnout, sometimes even suicide. The tragedy is not that he is weak, but that his energy is consumed by fighting himself. The second consequence is relational. A man disconnected from his real strength cannot truly connect with others. He confuses dominance with intimacy. He hides his vulnerability and then wonders why no one ever really knows him. His marriage becomes a battlefield because he projects his shadow onto his wife. She becomes either the angel who must redeem him or the demon who is to blame for his pain. His children do not inherit wisdom from him. They inherit fear, distance, or silence, and so the cycle repeats. His sons learn to wear the same mask. His daughters learn to distrust men altogether. The unintegrated father breeds more fragmentation in the next generation. The third consequence is social, and this is where Jung's warning becomes terrifying. Men who never discover their real strength are easy prey for movements that promise them borrowed power. They become soldiers of ideologies, instruments of collective shadows. History is full of examples. Economic collapse, mass unemployment, and suddenly millions of men, stripped of their roles, rally behind destructive leaders who promise to restore their strength. But it is not real strength they receive. It is borrowed rage, borrowed certainty. And when collective shadows merge, societies burn. Jung saw this firsthand in the rise of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century. He understood that what begins as an individual's refusal to face his shadow can end as a nation possessed by it. A man like Michael, multiplied by millions, becomes an army of hollow men, men who follow without question because they have no inner compass. Hollow men do not create culture, they destroy it. And the consequences are not only historical. Look around today. Rising addiction, midlife crises, fathers who abandon families, men who seek strength in violence, in extremist groups, in endless consumption. These are not separate problems. They are symptoms of the same root disease, the refusal to confront the unconscious, the failure to discover real strength. What Jung reveals is sobering. If a man never begins this work, his fate is not neutral. He does not simply live a quiet life. He becomes a vessel for his shadow, and through him, the shadow spills into his family, his community, his society. He thinks he is avoiding danger by staying comfortable. In reality, he is feeding the very danger that will consume him. This is the dark truth. The man who never discovers his real strength is not just lost. He is dangerous, not because he intends harm, but because what is unconscious in him will find a way out. And the cost will not only be his own life, it will be borne by everyone who depends on him, everyone who loves him, and ultimately by the society that allowed him to stay asleep. If the collapse of the mask is the beginning, then what follows is the possibility of rebirth. Jung called this lifelong journey individuation, the process of becoming who you really are. It is not an easy path. It is not glamorous. It often begins in the darkest place imaginable, but it is the only path to real strength. Jung often described this transformation through the language of alchemy, the ancient practice of turning base metals into gold. For him, the gold was not literal. It was the self, the unified and integrated man. And the stages of alchemy describe the stages of interchange. The first stage is nigredo, the blackening. This is the stage Michael unknowingly entered when he lost his job. Everything familiar breaks down. The old identity dies. The man feels despair, confusion, chaos. It feels like death because, in a sense, it is. It is the death of the persona. Most men resist this stage. They try to rebuild the old mask, find another job, another title, another distraction. But Jung saw nigredo as necessary. Without the death of the false identity, the true self can never emerge. Real strength begins here, in the ashes of collapse. The second stage is albedo, the whitening. After the breakdown comes the slow work of purification. This is where a man begins to see his shadow instead of denying it. He names his anger, his envy, his fear. He admits them, not to indulge them, but to bring them into the light. He also begins to encounter the anima, often through dreams. Jung believed dreams speak in the language of symbols. A man might dream of a mysterious woman, sometimes a guide, sometimes a destroyer. She represents the anima, the hidden feminine within him. Meeting her is unsettling, but it is also the beginning of a new relationship with his emotions. He starts to see that feeling is not weakness, that tenderness is not fragility, that vulnerability is not defeat. The albedo stage is cleansing because it washes away denial and replaces it with awareness. The third stage is rubedo, the reddening. Here, the opposites are united. The ego, the conscious self, no longer fights the unconscious. Instead, it learns to listen, to integrate, to cooperate with the self, which is larger than ego. This is where real strength appears. It is no longer dependent on job titles, social approval, or the fragile persona. It is rooted in an inner authority. A man at this stage does not need to prove himself constantly. He does not fear the collapse of external roles because he has discovered a strength that no one can take away. He becomes whole, and in that wholeness, he becomes powerful. Jung emphasized that this transformation is not a linear path. Negredo, albedo, and rubedo repeat in cycles throughout life. Each crisis can become another chance to deepen integration. But the map is clear. Collapse is not the end. It is the doorway. For Michael, this would mean facing his shadow instead of drowning in whiskey. It would mean admitting the rage and fear he buried for decades, then learning to own them without being controlled by them. It would mean encountering his anima, perhaps in dreams, and allowing her to teach him that love and tenderness are not the enemy. And ultimately, it would mean discovering that his worth was never in his role as provider, but in his capacity to live as a whole human being. This is the journey most men avoid because it is painful. It feels like death. But Jung's insight is clear. The man who refuses this path lives half a life. He survives on masks. The man who accepts the path may suffer, but he emerges with a strength unshakable by circumstance. The alchemists believed that turning lead into gold was a miracle. Jung believed the real miracle is turning the broken pieces of a human life into something whole. Real strength is not the mask of the provider, not the silence of the stoic, not the dominance of the unfeeling. Real strength is the courage to descend into the darkness, face what waits there, and come back carrying the light. Jung never promised that individuation was simple. He called it a lifelong task, one that demands courage and honesty. But while the journey is vast, it begins with small, concrete steps. For men like Michael, and for millions of men who sense the same emptiness, there are practices that open the door to real strength. These practices are not abstract theories. They are ways of confronting the unconscious and integrating what has been hidden. The first practice is shadow work. The shadow is everything you deny about yourself, everything you push down. Jung insisted that until you confront it, it controls you. One practical way to begin is deceptively simple. Write down 20 things about yourself that you are ashamed of, that you hide from others, or that you refuse to admit. Choose just one of them and sit with it. Ask yourself how it shows up in your life, how it sabotages you, how it demands to be seen. Do not excuse it. Do not rationalize it. Simply recognize it as part of you. By naming one element of the shadow, you begin to weaken its hold. You turn what was unconscious into something conscious, and that act alone shifts power from the shadow to you. The second practice is keeping a dream journal. Jung believed dreams are the direct voice of the unconscious. They speak in images and symbols, not in rational explanations. Each morning, write down whatever fragments of your dreams you remember. Look for patterns, for recurring figures or themes. Do not rush to interpret them in a literal way. Instead, amplify them. Compare them to myths, to stories, to symbols from culture. A dream about drowning might not mean death, but transformation. A dream of a mysterious woman might be the anima seeking attention. When you record your dreams, you start a dialogue with the unconscious. It is like learning a forgotten language, and in time, that language begins to guide you. The third practice is active imagination. Jung developed this as a way to consciously engage with the unconscious. Set aside 10 minutes. Close your eyes. Allow an image or a figure to arise in your mind. It might be a shadowy stranger, a child, an animal, even a terrifying figure. Instead of pushing it away, speak to it. Ask it what it wants. Ask why it has come. Then write down the dialogue. It may sound strange, even childish. But Jung used this method himself, and through it, he confronted the deepest parts of his psyche. Active imagination allows you to meet the forces within you not as enemies, but as voices that carry messages you need to hear. The fourth practice is seeking mentorship and brotherhood. Jung emphasized that individuation is deeply personal, but it is not meant to be entirely solitary. A man lost in his own shadow easily drowns. A mentor, especially an older man who has walked the path, can serve as a guide through the chaos. A group of men committed to honesty and growth can serve as mirrors, showing you truths you cannot see alone. Brotherhood does not replace the inner work, but it strengthens your capacity to face it. Men have always needed tribes, not just to survive in the world, but to survive within themselves. The fifth practice is creative reinvestment. Jung himself painted, carved, built stone towers. He believed that when psychic energy is not expressed, it becomes destructive. By channeling it into creation, you give form to the unconscious. For some men, this may be writing. For others, painting, music, martial arts, building something with their hands. The point is not perfection. The point is expression. Creation allows you to meet parts of yourself you cannot reach through logic alone. These practices do not give instant results. They demand consistency and patience, but they transform the relationship you have with yourself. Instead of being ruled by the unconscious, you begin to cooperate with it. Instead of collapsing when the persona falls, you discover an inner strength that cannot be taken from you. Michael never made these steps, but you can. The challenge is not whether you will face the darkness. Life guarantees that sooner or later you will. The challenge is whether you face it consciously or let it swallow you unconsciously. Real strength is not about avoiding the darkness. It is about entering it willingly, tools in hand, and returning with something of value. Michael's story began with the collapse of a job. But in truth, it was never about the job. It was about a man who had mistaken the mask for the man himself. When the mask was taken away, there was nothing left to hold him. That emptiness is what destroyed him. And yet, in Jung's language, that collapse could have been the beginning of his transformation. The nigredo, the death of the false so that something real could emerge. Most men never take that step. They rebuild the mask. They find another role, another distraction, another way to silence the voice within. They think they have escaped, but in time, the shadow returns, and the cycle repeats. It does not have to end that way. You do not have to live and die as a hollow man. Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. Real strength is not given by society. It is not held in your job or your status or in how others see you. It is forged by the courage to look inside, to face what you fear, and to integrate it into who you are." Michael never chose that path, but you can. And the first step is small. Tonight, write down just one part of yourself that you hide from others. One weakness, one flaw, one shadow. Look at it without judgment. That simple act can begin a dialogue with the unconscious that has been waiting your entire life. Because the real question is not what happens when a man loses his job, or his title, or his mask. The real question is what happens when a man never discovers his real strength. And the answer is written all around us, in broken lives, in broken families, in societies unraveling under the weight of hollow men. Do not be one of them. Begin the work. Face the darkness. And you may find, as Jung promised, that the place where you stumble is the place where your real strength waits to be born.